"You're just taking up space," my son Ethan said without needing to raise his voice as if those words were perfectly reasonable. He didn't even look up from his phone as he spoke, the blue glow reflecting off his face in our dimly lit living room. The room where I had read him bedtime stories, nursed his fevers, and celebrated his achievements for over 4 decades. I stood there frozen, my arthritic fingers clutching the teacup I'd just prepared for him. The Earl Grey, his favorite since college, still steaming. The china cup was from the wedding set William and I had received 45 years ago. One of the few treasured items I still had in my possession. I'm Grace Campbell, 69 years old, and after 40 years as a nurse at Memorial Hospital, I thought I had seen the worst of human suffering. I was wrong. Nothing prepares you for when the pain comes from your own flesh and blood. 6 months earlier, the morning light filtered through the kitchen curtains, casting a warm glow across my well-worn oak table. I hummed softly as I prepared breakfast, the familiar rhythm of cracking eggs and toasting bread, bringing a quiet contentment. Outside, my garden of roses, particularly the peace roses William had planted for our 25th anniversary, swayed gently in the spring breeze. William had been gone for 3 years now. A sudden heart attack while tending to those very roses. One moment discussing our plans to visit the Grand Canyon, the next moment gone forever. The grief had been a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. But somehow I had found a way forward. My retirement fund was robust. $8,000 a month was more than enough for my modest needs. The house was paid off, a 3-bedroom craftsman style in a quiet neighborhood where most of my neighbors had also grown gray alongside me. I volunteered at the hospital twice a week, played bridge with my friends on Thursdays, and spent countless hours nurturing my roses. It wasn't the life I had imagined with William, but it was peaceful. The phone's shrill ring interrupted my thoughts. "Mom!" Ethan's voice sounded strained. At 42, my only child had built a successful career in marketing, or so I thought. "Ethan, is everything okay?" Mother's intuition never fades no matter how old your child becomes. "Not really," his voice cracked. "Vanessa and we both lost our jobs. The company's downsizing. It's happening all over the industry." My heart sank for him. Ethan had always been ambitious, driven. This must be devastating. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. What can I do to help?" A long pause. "We're going to have to give up our apartment. The lease is up next month anyway, and..." Another pause. "We were wondering if we could stay with you, just until we get back on our feet." I didn't hesitate. "Of course you can. This house has always been your home, too." I spent the next week preparing. I cleared out William's study, which I'd preserved almost like a shrine, and converted it back to Ethan's old bedroom. I bought new sheets, stocked the refrigerator with his favorite foods, and cleaned until my back ached, and my hands were raw from the cleaning products. When they arrived with their suitcases and boxes, I embraced my son tightly, feeling his body sag against mine in relief. Vanessa stood back, her smile tight. We had never been close. She was 38, beautiful in that polished way that always made me feel slightly unkempt in comparison. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her makeup perfect, despite what must have been a stressful move. "Thank you for having us, Grace." She said the words correct, but her tone distant. "Your family," I replied simply. That first evening, as we sat around the dining table eating the pot roast I'd prepared, Ethan's childhood favorite, I noticed how Vanessa's eyes scanned the room, lingering on the antique cabinet that had belonged to my grandmother, the silver candlesticks from our wedding, the framed photograph of William. "This house has so much character," she said, the slight pause speaking volumes. "Mom's kept it exactly the same since I was a kid." Ethan chuckled, but there was an edge to his voice I couldn't quite place. "Well, not exactly the same." I smiled. "The kitchen was remodeled 10 years ago." "It still feels like stepping back in time," Vanessa murmured, and I couldn't tell if it was an observation or a criticism. Later that week, Ethan found me struggling to reach a serving dish on the top shelf of the kitchen cabinet. "Mom, why don't you take the small bedroom?" he suggested, steadying me as I wobbled on the step stool. "It'll be easier for you, everything at arm's reach, less to clean, and the bathroom's right next door." "But you and Vanessa would be cramped in there," I protested. "We'll manage better in the master bedroom. The closet space alone would make a huge difference for Vanessa's work clothes when she starts interviewing." His reasoning made sense, and his concern touched me. So I agreed, moving my belongings to the smallest bedroom that had once been a sewing room. It meant giving up the view of my rose garden, but I told myself it was temporary. a mother's sacrifice for her child's comfort. That night, as I arranged my few personal items in the new space, Williams photographed my worn Bible, the small jewelry box with my wedding ring, and the pearl necklace he'd given me on our 30th anniversary. I felt a strange displacement, like a guest in my own home. But I pushed the feeling away. This was what families did for each other. The first month of our new living arrangement passed in a blur of adjustments. Ethan spent his days hunched over his laptop, sending out resumes and networking calls. Vanessa was often out saying she had interviews or meetings with connections. I tried to give them space, busying myself in the garden or visiting friends. One evening I returned from my bridge game to find Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, bills spread out before him, his face drawn with worry. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting down my purse. He ran a hand through his hair, dark like William's had been before it turned silver. "Just trying to figure out how to make ends meet. Unemployment doesn't go far, and Vanessa's severance is almost gone." I sat down across from him, my heart aching for his struggle. "I can help you know. My pension is more than enough for all of us." "Mom, I can't ask you to support us." "You're not asking. I'm offering." I reached across to squeeze his hand. "Let me handle the household expenses for now." Relief washed over his face. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," I smiled. "But I'm terrible with all these online banking things now. They keep changing the websites and I can never remember all the passwords." Ethan's expression brightened. "I can help with that. Why don't I manage the bills? It would give me something useful to do, and you wouldn't have to worry about it." It seemed like the perfect solution. The next day I gave Ethan my debit card and PIN along with access to my online banking. "Just make sure to leave me some cash for groceries and my little indulgences," I joked, thinking of my weekly hairdresser appointment and occasional lunches with friends. "Of course, Mom. I'll take good care of everything." And for a while he did. The bills were paid on time, there was food in the refrigerator, and Ethan seemed more positive, taking pride in managing the household while he continued his job search. Vanessa remained distant but polite. She spent hours on her laptop at the dining table or making calls from the backyard, her voice animated in a way it never was when she spoke to me. Once I overheard her mention investment opportunity and perfect location. But when I asked about it later, she simply said she was exploring options for when they got back on their feet. It was a warm Tuesday afternoon when I made a troubling discovery. I was tidying up the living room while Ethan was out at a networking event. His phone, forgotten on the coffee table, lit up with a text message. I wouldn't normally look, but the name caught my eye, Big Win Casino. The message preview was brief but alarming. "Payment due, 48 hours, or we discuss alternatives." My hand trembled as I set the phone back down. Gambling Ethan. He had never shown any interest in gambling before. William and I had raised him to be financially responsible, to live within his means. Had losing his job pushed him to desperation? When he returned home, I waited until after dinner when Vanessa was taking a shower to broach the subject. "Ethan, I saw a text message on your phone today," I began cautiously. "From a casino." His face instantly hardened. "You were checking my phone." No, I said quickly. It lit up while I was cleaning. I couldn't help but see it. "Is everything okay?" He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, that. It's just a joke between friends. We have this fantasy football league, and we call it Casino because of how competitive it gets." "It mentioned a payment due," I pressed gently. "Mom, seriously, it's nothing." His tone sharpened. "Just a silly bet on a game. $20 tops. Please don't make this into something it's not." I wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. So I nodded and apologized for my concern, though the knot in my stomach didn't ease. That night I lay awake in my small bedroom staring at the ceiling. Was I overreacting? Ethan was an adult after all. If he wanted to place a small bet now and then, wasn't that his business? But something about his defensiveness, the quickness of his explanation, left me unsettled. I resolved to keep a closer eye on things, but not to pry. He was under enough stress without his mother questioning his integrity. As summer faded into fall, subtle changes began to transform my home and my life within it. It started with small suggestions that grew increasingly difficult to refuse. "This sofa has seen better days, hasn't it?" Vanessa commented one evening, running her hand over the worn fabric of the couch, where William and I had spent countless evenings watching old movies. "We could probably sell it and find something more current." Before I could object, Ethan chimed in. "She's right, Mom. This thing is practically an antique. Plus, we could use the extra cash right now." 2 days later, the sofa was gone sold to a young couple through an online marketplace. The money less than I would have expected went into the household fund, as Ethan put it. Next was the dining set, then William's recliner, then the antique cabinet. Each time there was a practical reason, too old, too fragile, worth too much to just sit there collecting dust. Each time I felt a piece of my history, my life with William, slipping away. When I asked about logging into my bank account to check something, Ethan informed me they'd updated the security settings. The bank recommended it, he explained. Too many scams targeting seniors these days. Don't worry about it. I've got everything under control. I should have pushed back then, should have insisted on access to my own accounts. But there was always a reason why it wasn't the right time. Ethan was stressed about an interview. Vanessa wasn't feeling well. They were in the middle of an important application for a business loan. My cash allowance for groceries gradually dwindled, with Vanessa taking over the shopping. It's the least I can do while staying here, she insisted. But the quality of what we ate changed. I found myself eating ramen noodles and crackers for lunch, while Ethan and Vanessa ordered takeout that they rarely shared. One afternoon, I was watering my roses when I noticed a stack of mail on Ethan's desk through the window. Curious I hadn't seen my mail in weeks, I went to check once I finished in the garden. Among the envelopes was one from my bank. I opened it, heart racing, with a guilt that I shouldn't have felt in my own home. It was a statement for a new business account, Vanessa's Vintage Consignment. And it was in my name. My hands trembled as I read the details. A business account had been opened using my information, with Vanessa listed as the authorized manager. My funds had been transferred into it, $15,000 so far. I was still staring at the paper when I heard the front door open. Quickly, I folded the statement and slipped it into my pocket. "Grace, we brought dinner," Vanessa called out, unusually cheerful. I composed myself and went to the kitchen, where they were unpacking Chinese food containers, enough for 3 for once. "What's the special occasion?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Great news," Ethan beamed. "Vanessa's new business venture is taking off. She's found the perfect location for her consignment shop." "Is that so?" I said, meeting Vanessa's eyes. "I'd love to hear more about it." "It's a boutique consignment store for designer clothes," she explained, her excitement genuine. "I've always had an eye for fashion, and there's a real market for affordable luxury in this area. We've secured a small space in the Madison Avenue shopping center." "Sounds wonderful," I said, my smile fixed. "How did you manage the startup costs? Those can be substantial." A flicker of something alarm guilt crossed her face before she recovered. "Oh, we've been saving, and I got a small business grant." Lies. All lies. But I said nothing that night, turning over my options as I picked at my lo mein. Direct confrontation seemed dangerous. What if it pushed them further into deception? Maybe I needed to gather more information first, understand the full extent of what was happening. The next day, I waited until they were both out before searching for more evidence. In the master bedroom, my old bedroom, I found a notebook in Vanessa's nightstand. Inside was a detailed business plan for the consignment shop, with projected expenses, revenue forecasts, and a timeline. And there it was listed clearly under initial investment, Grace's retirement fund. $50,000 secured. My vision blurred with tears of betrayal. $50,000 of my money earmarked without my knowledge or consent. Money I had worked decades to save. Money meant to sustain me through my remaining years. When had my son become this person? The boy who once returned the extra change to a cashier was now stealing from his own mother. The child I had sacrificed for working double shifts to pay for his private school skipping meals to ensure he had the best, now saw me as nothing but a resource to exploit. I closed the notebook and returned it exactly as I'd found it. Then I went to my small room, closed the door, and for the first time since William died, I wept without restraint. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of pretending I didn't know what I knew, while trying to subtly regain some control over my life and finances. I made excuses to use Ethan's computer when he wasn't looking, hoping to access my accounts, but found they had changed all the passwords. I called my bank, only to discover that someone Ethan using my personal information had changed the contact number and email address on file. "We can send a reset link to the email address on record," the helpful customer service representative told me. "And what email is that?" I asked, already knowing it wouldn't be mine. She read out an address I didn't recognize, confirming my fears. "That's not my email," I said, my voice trembling. "I think someone may have unauthorized access to my account." "I understand your concern, ma'am. You'll need to come into a branch with your ID to sort this out." But getting to a bank branch proved harder than I expected. My car, a modest Toyota I'd had for years, had been sold a month earlier. "It's just sitting in the driveway, Mom," Ethan had reasoned. "The insurance is expensive and you hardly drive anymore." Now I understood why they'd been so eager to eliminate my transportation. I was contemplating asking my neighbor Dorothy for a ride when Vanessa appeared at my bedroom door. "Grace, Ethan and I are heading to the store. Do you need anything?" "Actually," I said, seizing the opportunity, "could you drop me at the bank? I need to sort out something with my safe deposit box." A lie, but a necessary one. Her smile faltered. "Today's not good. We're on a tight schedule. Maybe tomorrow?" "It's rather important," I pressed. "I'll tell you what," she offered, her voice honeyed. "Give me your list and ID and I'll take care of it for you." "That's very kind, but it requires my signature in person." Vanessa's eyes hardened slightly. "Grace, I really don't think today works. Ethan is stressed enough without adding extra stops. He had a rough night." "Gambling again?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her expression shifted from surprise to calculation in an instant. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I saw the messages on his phone," I admitted, "and the calls from collection agencies." Vanessa stepped fully into my room and closed the door behind her. "Listen, Grace, Ethan has been going through a tough time. Yes, he's made some mistakes, but he's working on it. The last thing he needs is his mother making him feel worse about himself." "I'm not trying to make him feel bad," I said. "I'm worried about him, about both of you." "Then trust us to handle it," she insisted. "Ethan feels worthless enough being unemployed and living with his mother at his age. Questioning him about every decision only damages his self-esteem further." The manipulation was masterful. Turn my concern into an attack, my questions into criticism. "I'm sorry," I found myself saying. "You're right. I don't want to add to his stress." She smiled, victorious. "We're doing what's best for everyone, Grace. This business will change everything. Once it's successful, we'll be able to pay back whatever we've borrowed, and more." I nodded, but as soon as she left, I felt a wave of self-loathing. How easily I'd been maneuvered into compliance, into accepting the theft of my own money as a loan. Later that afternoon, Dorothy from next door stopped by with a homemade apple pie. At 72, she was still spry with a sharp mind and sharper tongue. "Thought I'd check on you," she said as I invited her in. "Haven't seen you at Garden Club in weeks, and I noticed your car is gone." We sat at the kitchen table, new and cold, nothing like my old oak one, and I served us both slices of pie. "Ethan thought it made more sense to sell it," I explained. "I don't drive much anymore." Dorothy's eyes narrowed. "And how are you supposed to get around Sprout Wings?" I laughed weakly. "They drive me when I need to go somewhere." She took a bite of pie, studying me over her fork. "And where's all your furniture gone? This place used to be so cozy." "We're updating things," I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. "Grace Campbell." Dorothy set down her fork with a decisive click. "I've known you for 20 years, and you've never cared about updating anything except your nursing credentials. What's really going on?" For a moment, I considered telling her everything: the stolen money, the gambling, the consignment shop built on my retirement fund. But shame held me back. What kind of mother raises a son who would steal from her? What kind of woman allows herself to be manipulated so completely? "It's just been an adjustment having them here," I said instead. "They have different tastes." Dorothy clearly didn't believe me, but she didn't press. Instead, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "If you need anything, a ride, a meal, or just a conversation that doesn't involve updating things, I'm right next door." After she left, I stood in my kitchen that no longer felt like mine and made a decision. I needed to talk to someone who would understand without judgment, someone who knew Ethan, but would be objective. That evening, I waited until Ethan and Vanessa were engrossed in a show before slipping into my bedroom to make a video call to my brother Michael in Chicago. Michael was 4 years younger than me, a retired accountant with a no-nonsense approach to life. After William died, he had offered to have me move to Chicago, but I couldn't bear to leave the home where we had built our lives. His face appeared on the screen, lined but kind. "Gracie, this is a pleasant surprise." "Hi, Michael." I smiled, keeping my voice low. "How are you?" "Can't complain. Rachel's baby is keeping us busy with grandparent duties." His expression turned concerned. "But you look tired, sis. Everything okay?" I hesitated, then decided on a half-truth. "Ethan and Vanessa are staying with me. They both lost their jobs a few months ago." Michael's eyebrows rose. Both of them? That's rough. How's it going? It's an adjustment. I repeated the phrase I'd used with Dorothy. I've given up the master bedroom and they're helping manage the finances while they get back on their feet. Managing your finances. Michael's accountant instincts were clearly triggered. What exactly does that mean? Just the household bills helping with banking, I said, already regretting bringing it up. Grace, his voice took on the stern tone he'd used since childhood. Tell me you haven't given them access to your accounts. I couldn't meet his eyes even through the screen. Jesus, Gracie, he sighed. How much control have you given them? It's temporary, I defended, though I no longer believed it myself. Until they get back on their feet. And how's that job search going? He pressed. Ethan has had some interviews. Vanessa is starting a business. With whose money? Before I could answer, I heard footsteps approaching my door. I have to go, I whispered. I'll call you soon. I disconnected just as there was a knock. Mom, Ethan called. Who are you talking to? I opened the door phone clutched in my hand. Just catching up with Michael. Something dark flashed across Ethan's face. Uncle Michael, what did you tell him? Nothing much, just that you're staying with me for a while. He held out his hand. Let me see your phone. Excuse me? Your phone, Mom. Let me see who you've been calling. The demand was so unexpected, so inappropriate, that for a moment I could only stare at him. This was my son, the boy I had cradled in my arms, taught to say please and thank you, raised to be respectful. No, I said, finally surprised at my own firmness. My phone is private. Ethan's face hardened. We're concerned about you, Mom. You've been getting confused lately, mixing up facts. Remember last week when you thought someone had moved your jewelry box? I wasn't confused. It was moved. I had found it in a different drawer, several pieces missing. See, this is what we're worried about. These memory issues could make you vulnerable to scammers. There are a lot of people who target seniors. The irony was almost too much to bear. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own phone, Ethan. He sighed dramatically. Fine, but don't say we didn't try to protect you when you get your identity stolen or give away your savings to some phone scammer. As he walked away, I clutched my phone tighter, a lifeline to the outside world that I now realized was in danger of being cut. I needed to hide it to protect this small connection to people who might help me. That night I lay awake, the weight of my situation pressing down on me. I had raised Ethan to be better than this. Where had I gone wrong? Was this punishment for working too many hours when he was young, for not being strict enough, for being too generous? No, this wasn't my failure. This was a choice, his choice to exploit the person who had given him everything. As the moonlight filtered through the thin curtains of my small room, I made a silent promise to myself and to William's memory I would not be erased from my own life. I would not become a footnote in the story of my own home. Somehow I would find a way to regain control. 6 months after Ethan and Vanessa moved in, my life had become unrecognizable. The home I had built with William over 4 decades now felt like a prison where I was merely tolerated. My beautiful furniture had been replaced with sleek, uncomfortable pieces I would never have chosen. My photographs had been relegated to my small bedroom, deemed cluttered by Vanessa's minimalist aesthetic. But the changes to my living space paled in comparison to the changes in my daily existence. My meals had been reduced to ramen noodles, crackers, and occasional canned soup foods that suited my age and digestion, according to Vanessa. Meanwhile, the aroma of their delivered meals, Thai food steaks, gourmet pizzas, would waft under my door, a cruel reminder of the inequity that had become my reality. One evening I stood in the kitchen, staring at the bare shelves of what was once a well-stocked pantry. Oh, looking for something, Mom. Ethan appeared in the doorway, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand. William's whiskey from the bottle we'd been saving for special occasions. Just something for dinner, I replied, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. There's ramen in the cabinet, he said, not meeting my eyes. He wore a new designer shirt I'd never seen before, the price tag probably equivalent to a week's worth of decent groceries. I've had that 3 times this week, I said quietly. I was hoping for something with a bit more nutrition. Ethan sighed dramatically. We're on a tight budget, Mom. We can't afford to keep 3 adults on luxury diets. The absurdity of his statement, my request for basic nutrition labeled a luxury, made me dizzy with disbelief. Ethan, I'm not asking for lobster, just perhaps some vegetables, chicken. If you're unhappy with the arrangements, he cut in, his voice suddenly cold. We can look into assisted living facilities. They provide balanced meals. The threat hung in the air between us. It wasn't the first time he had mentioned facilities or homes when I expressed even the mildest dissatisfaction. The ramen will be fine. I conceded, my stomach clenching at the thought of another sodium-laden meal. He nodded and turned to leave, then paused. By the way, Vanessa and I are going out tonight. Don't wait up. After they left, I stood in the empty kitchen fighting back tears of frustration and hunger. My garden, once my solace, had been largely neglected as my energy waned. Still, I forced myself to go outside to check on my beloved roses. The October air had a bite to it, and I wrapped my cardigan, one of the few pieces of clothing they hadn't donated to Vanessa's shop, tightly around me. My roses were struggling, many of the bushes showing signs of disease and neglect. I knelt painfully on the hard ground and began removing dead leaves and blooms, murmuring apologies to the plants that had brought me so much joy. "I'll do better by you," I whispered, as though the roses could understand my broken promises. "Once I figure this out, I'll make it right." As I worked, my vision blurred occasionally, a combination of tears and something else, something concerning. The dizziness had been coming more frequently lately, along with a persistent fatigue that seemed to seep into my bones. My blood pressure medication had run out weeks ago, and when I asked Ethan for $20 to refill it, he had looked at me as though I'd requested a small fortune. "Can't it wait until next month?" he had asked. "We're really tight right now with the shop's opening expenses." "It's for my heart, Ethan. The doctor says I can't miss doses." He had sighed, that now familiar sound of put upon sacrifice. "I'll see what I can do," he said, but the prescription remained unfilled. Now, as I tended to my roses, a wave of dizziness hit me so strongly that I had to grab the wooden bench for support. The world tilted dangerously, edges of my vision darkening. I eased myself onto the bench, breathing slowly until the sensation passed. When I finally felt steady enough to stand, I noticed a white envelope half hidden beneath a rose bush, likely blown there by the wind. I picked it up, recognizing the logo of my bank. Inside was a statement for my primary checking account, the one my pension was deposited into each month. With trembling hands, I unfolded it. Available balance, $37.42. I stared at the number, unable to comprehend it at first. $8,000 should have been deposited just 2 weeks ago. Where had it gone? The statement showed dozens of transfers to the business account I'd discovered earlier, along with cash withdrawals, online purchases from luxury retailers, and payments to credit cards I didn't recognize. My entire financial life was being drained away month by month by the son I had raised and the woman he had married. I carefully refolded the statement and tucked it into my pocket. I needed to document this to gather evidence. If I confronted them now, they would only take the statement and deny everything. That night, as I lay in bed listening to them return home, laughing, the scent of expensive perfume and alcohol drifting under my door, I made a decision. I would call Michael again, tell him everything this time. But first, I needed more evidence. The next morning, Ethan found me at the kitchen table with a cup of weak tea, the only breakfast option available to me. "Mom, we need to talk about the shop's grand opening next week," he said, pouring himself coffee from an expensive machine that had replaced my simple drip maker. "We're a bit short on the catering deposit." I looked up at him, trying to see the little boy who had once brought me dandelions from the yard, proudly announcing they were sunshine flowers. Where had that child gone? "I saw my bank statement yesterday," I said quietly. His hand froze midway to his mouth. "What statement?" "For my checking account. The one that should have over $8,000 in it, but somehow only has 37. Ethan set his cup down slowly. "Where did you get that?" "It came in the mail." "That's impossible. We changed the address for all your statements." The casual admission of their deception hung in the air between us. "So you admit it?" I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You've been taking my money without my permission." Before he could respond, Vanessa walked in dressed in expensive workout clothes, despite never going to a gym. "Taking your money," she laughed incredulously. "Grace, we've been supporting you. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to maintain this house, to pay for your utilities, your food, your medical expenses?" "My pension is $8,000 a month," I said firmly. "The mortgage is paid off. The utilities have never been more than a few $100s. "And your medical costs?" Vanessa challenged. "Do you know what Medicare doesn't cover, how expensive your medications are?" "My prescription that you refuse to refill costs $20, I replied. $20 out of $8,000. Ethan stepped in, his voice softening in that patronizing way I'd come to dread. Mom, you're getting confused again. We've been through this. Your pension barely covers the basics, especially with inflation. We're helping you manage so you don't outlive your savings. By spending it on designer clothes, on gourmet takeout that you never share, on a business in my name that I never authorized. Vanessa's expression hardened. We've put our lives on hold to care for you, Grace. We gave up our apartment, our independence. Everything we've done has been for all of us to secure our future as a family. By stealing from me, my voice broke on the last word. Stealing, Ethan's voice rose. Is that how you see our relationship? After everything we've done, after we've given up our freedom to be your caretakers, you accuse us of stealing. The manipulation was so blatant, so calculated, that it momentarily left me speechless. You're being selfish, Mom, Ethan continued, twisting the knife. Vanessa and I are trying to build something for our future, for all of our futures. The shop will provide income for the whole family, but instead of supporting us, you're accusing us of crimes. I never agreed to fund your business ventures, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Because you don't understand modern business, Vanessa interjected. This is an investment in our collective future, but you're too stuck in the past to see it. If it's such a good investment, I challenged, why didn't you get a business loan? Why take it from my retirement? Because banks don't give loans to people with no income, Ethan shouted, his composure finally cracking. Because we're living on scraps while you sit on a fortune you'll never live long enough to spend anyway. The truth at last, naked and ugly. I stared at my son, this stranger wearing Ethan's face, and felt something inside me shatter. Get out of my house. A tense silence fell. Then Ethan laughed, a bitter sound with no humor. Your house? I think you're forgetting something, Mom. Who's paying the bills now? Who's making sure the lights stay on? Whose name did Dad put on the deed, just in case? My blood ran cold. William had indeed added Ethan to the deed years ago, a precautionary measure meant to avoid probate if I passed away. It had never occurred to me that it could be used against me. This is as much my house as yours, Ethan continued, his voice dangerously soft. More legally speaking. And I think it's time we discussed more permanent arrangements for your care, somewhere with professionals who can handle your confusion. The threat was clear. If I continued to resist, they would try to force me into a facility using my confusion as justification. My word against theirs, and they had spent months laying the groundwork to discredit me. I stood up shakily. I need some air. Neither of them moved to stop me as I made my way to the back door and out into my garden. Once there, I sat heavily on the bench, my legs no longer able to support me. How had it come to this? My own son threatening me, gaslighting me, stealing from me. I had given him everything. Love, support, education opportunities I never had. And this was my reward, to be treated as nothing more than an obstacle to his greed. The roses swayed gently in the autumn breeze, oblivious to my despair. William's favorites, the peace roses, were struggling the most, their once vibrant blooms now sparse and pale. I wish you were here, I whispered to the ghost of my husband. You'd know what to do. But William wasn't here, and I was alone in a battle I hadn't been prepared to fight. My phone had disappeared a week earlier, leaving me even more isolated. My neighbors were friendly but distant, unlikely to intervene in what appeared to be a family matter, except for Dorothy, and Michael, who I hadn't been able to reach since our interrupted call. A plan began to form in my mind. I would need to be careful, strategic. I couldn't outmaneuver them with force or legal knowledge, not yet, not alone. But I could begin gathering evidence documenting the financial abuse. If I could get to a bank, speak to someone in person. The question was how to get there without raising their suspicions. The days that followed were a delicate dance of pretending compliance while secretly planning my resistance. I smiled at their thinly veiled insults, nodded at their condescending explanations, and pretended not to notice when more of my belongings disappeared. We donated your winter coats to charity, Vanessa informed me one morning. They were outdated and taking up closet space. Don't worry, we kept one for you. The one was my lightest jacket, barely suitable for fall, let alone the harsh winter ahead. But I thanked her with a practiced smile, as though her theft was a kindness. My physical health continued to deteriorate. Without my blood pressure medication, I experienced frequent headaches and dizziness. My weight dropped as I subsisted on minimal calories, my clothes hanging loose on my once sturdy frame. Ethan occasionally expressed concern, but it was performative, designed for an audience that wasn't there. "You're looking thin, Mom. Are you eating enough?" This from the man who controlled every morsel that entered the house, who counted out my allotment of crackers as though they were gold coins. "I'm fine," I would reply, the lie bitter on my tongue. "Just not very hungry these days." In truth, I was constantly hungry, my stomach a hollow ache that kept me awake at night. But admitting weakness would only give them more ammunition. The mental manipulation was even more insidious than the physical deprivation. Every time I questioned a missing item or a financial decision, I was told I was confused or forgetful. "Mom, we discussed this last week," Ethan would say with exaggerated patience. "You agreed to the transfer for the shop's rent." "I never had that conversation," I would insist. "See, Ethan, this is what I've been worried about," Vanessa would chime in. "These memory lapses are getting more frequent. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign to make me doubt my own mind, my own memories. And sometimes in my weakened state it worked. I would lie awake at night trying to piece together conversations, wondering if I had indeed forgotten agreements I'd made. But then I would remember the bank statement, the evidence of their theft, and my resolve would strengthen. I wasn't confused. I was being systematically abused by the people who should have protected me. One afternoon I was sitting in the living room when Vanessa entered, unusually animated. "We found the perfect location for your winter stay," she announced brightly. "Winter stay," I echoed. "Yes, the assisted living facility we've been discussing. Sunny Pines. They have an opening starting next month." My heart raced. "We haven't been discussing any facility." Vanessa's smile tightened. "Grace, we've talked about this several times. Your confusion is exactly why we need to consider professional care." "I'm not confused, and I'm not leaving my home." Her voice dropped, the false sweetness evaporating. "This isn't really a choice, Grace. The arrangements have been made. You can't force me into a home. I'm competent, and this is my house." "Is it?" Her smile turned predatory. "Ethan has joint ownership. And as for competence, well, we have months of documented episodes of confusion, missed medications, and inappropriate behavior." "What inappropriate behavior?" I demanded. "The neighbors have noticed you wandering in the garden at odd hours, talking to yourself. And Dorothy mentioned you've been making accusations about us stealing from you. Paranoid delusions are a clear sign of cognitive decline." My one potential ally turned against me with lies. I felt the walls closing in. "I won't go," I stated firmly, though my voice trembled. "We'll see." Vanessa turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Dr. Mercer will be stopping by tomorrow to evaluate you. Try to be cooperative. It'll make things easier for everyone." After she left, I sat frozen in terror. They were trying to have me declared incompetent to take full control of my assets, my home, my life. And they had been building their case methodically, turning my resistance into evidence of mental instability. I needed to act, and quickly. But how I had no phone, no transportation, no access to my money. In desperation, I decided to try reaching Dorothy again. Despite Vanessa's claim, I couldn't believe my neighbor of 20 years would turn against me so completely. I waited until dusk, when Ethan and Vanessa were occupied with a video call about the shop's opening, then slipped out the back door and through the garden gate that led to the alley behind our houses. Dorothy's kitchen light was on a warm glow in the gathering darkness. I knocked on her back door, praying she would answer. The door swung open, and Dorothy's lined face registered surprise, then concern. "Grace, goodness, you look terrible. I need help," I whispered, suddenly aware of how thin my nightgown was in the cool evening air. She ushered me inside without hesitation, sat me at her kitchen table, and placed a mug of hot tea in front of me. The simple kindness nearly broke me. "Now what's going on?" she asked, her direct manner a balm after months of manipulation. "They're stealing from me," I said, my voice catching. "Ethan and Vanessa. They've taken control of my accounts, they're selling my things, and now they're trying to put me in a home." Dorothy's expression darkened. "I knew something was wrong. You've lost so much weight, and I hardly see you anymore. They told me you were having episodes and needed rest." "It's not true," I insisted. "They're gaslighting me, making me seem confused so they can take everything." "I believe you," she said simply, and those 3 words nearly undid me. How long had it been since someone had simply believed me? "What can I do?" she asked, practical as ever. "I need to call my brother Michael in Chicago. He tried to warn me, but I didn't listen. And I need to get to a bank to freeze my accounts if there's anything left to freeze." Dorothy nodded. You can use my phone and my car if needed. But Grace, if they're as manipulative as you say, we need to be careful. If they suspect you're getting help, they might accelerate their plans. She was right, of course. I couldn't simply disappear for hours without raising alarms. Let me call Michael first, I decided. He'll know what to do. Dorothy handed me her cordless phone, and I dialed my brother's number with shaking fingers, praying he would answer. Hello? His familiar voice brought tears to my eyes. Michael, it's Grace, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need your help. I told Michael everything in a rushed whisper, the financial exploitation, the gaslighting, the threat of forced institutionalization. His silence as I spoke was punctuated only by occasional sharp intakes of breath. I'm coming, he said when I finished. I'll be on the first flight tomorrow. They won't let you in, I warned. They control who sees me now. Let me worry about that, he replied, a steel in his voice I hadn't heard before. In the meantime, I'm calling a lawyer friend in your area. Is there somewhere safe you can go tonight? I glanced at Dorothy, who nodded firmly. I can stay with my neighbor. Good. Don't go back to that house if you don't feel safe, Grace. Nothing, no possession, no property is worth your well-being. But the thought of abandoning my home, of leaving behind William's photographs, and the few treasures I had managed to hide from Ethan and Vanessa was unbearable. Besides, running would only confirm their narrative that I was unstable. I need to go back, I said. If I disappear, they'll use it against me. But I'll call you from Dorothy's if things get worse. Michael reluctantly agreed, extracting a promise that I would check in regularly using Dorothy's phone. After we hung up, Dorothy insisted on feeding me a proper meal, homemade soup and fresh bread, that made my neglected stomach ache with gratitude. You need to document everything, she advised as I ate. Write down dates, times, what they've taken. If you can get photos of your living conditions, the empty pantry, that would help too. I hadn't thought of that. I don't have a camera or phone anymore. She disappeared into another room and returned with an old digital camera. It's not fancy, but it works. Hide it well. Armed with Dorothy's camera and the strength that comes from knowing help is on the way, I returned to my house, slipping in through the back door as quietly as I had left. But not quietly enough. Where have you been? Ethan's voice came from the darkened living room, making me jump. Just getting some air in the garden. I lied, clutching my cardigan closed, praying he wouldn't notice the camera hidden in its pocket. He stepped closer, sniffing. You smell like food. Real food. I said nothing, my heart pounding. You went to Dorothy's, didn't you? He accused. After we specifically asked you not to bother the neighbors with your confusion. I'm not confused, Ethan. I know exactly what's happening. Something flickered in his eyes, fear perhaps, or recognition that his manipulation wasn't working as well as he'd thought. Then his expression hardened. Go to bed, Mom. We'll discuss your wandering with Dr. Mercer tomorrow. I retreated to my room, locking the door behind me, a small defiance that would likely cost me later, but necessary to hide Dorothy's camera. I found a spot at the back of my closet, behind a box of winter clothes they hadn't yet donated. Then I sat on my bed, trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Michael was coming. Help was on the way. I just needed to hold out a little longer. The next day passed in a haze of tension. Dr. Mercer, a young man who barely made eye contact and seemed more interested in his clipboard than my responses, asked a series of questions clearly designed to highlight confusion. When I answered lucidly, he simply rephrased the questions as though hoping to trip me up. Your son tells me you've been having difficulty remembering conversations, making accusations, he prompted. My son is lying, I replied calmly. I remember our conversations perfectly. I simply don't agree to the financial decisions he's making with my money without my consent. Dr. Mercer's eyebrows rose slightly, the first real reaction I'd seen from him. And why would your son lie about such things? Because he and his wife have systematically emptied my accounts to fund their business ventures and lifestyle. They're trying to discredit me to maintain access to my pension and potentially sell my home. He made a note, his expression unreadable. These are serious allegations, Mrs. Campbell. Yes, they are. And I have documentation to support them. This was a bluff. The bank statement was long gone taken when Ethan searched my room during the evaluation, but I maintained eye contact, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. After Dr. Mercer left, Ethan was furious. What did you say to him? He wouldn't discuss his findings with me. I told him the truth, I replied simply. The truth, he scoffed. You don't even know what day it is half the time. It's Thursday, October 14th. The weather is partly cloudy with a high of 62 degrees. The president is James Walker, elected last year. My full name is Grace Elizabeth Campbell Ney Roberts. I was born on May 3, 1956 in Springfield, Illinois. Would you like me to continue demonstrating my cognitive function? His face flushed with anger. One good day doesn't erase weeks of confusion. There never was any confusion, Ethan. Only your desperate attempts to create the illusion of it. He stepped closer, intimidating in his height and barely controlled rage. You're making a mistake, Mom. We're trying to help you. By stealing from me, by starving me, by isolating me from friends and family. That's not help, Ethan. That's abuse. I expected more anger, more threats. Instead, he turned and walked away, pulling out his phone as he went. I heard him speaking urgently to someone Vanessa I assumed, but couldn't make out the words. The rest of the day, they left me alone, whispering together in corners, exchanging tense looks. I used the opportunity to take photographs with Dorothy's camera, the empty pantry, my sparse bedroom, the bank statements I found in the trash showing transfers to their business account. That night, sleep eluded me. Every noise made me start convinced they were coming to force me into a facility. I had barricaded my door with the small dresser, not enough to truly stop them if they were determined, but enough to wake me if they tried. Dawn was just breaking when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Then another. Voices, one of them achingly familiar. Michael. I rushed to the window and saw my brother, silver-haired and straight-backed, despite his 65 years standing in my driveway alongside a tall, distinguished man carrying a briefcase. I quickly dressed and moved the dresser, my heart pounding with relief and fear. Would Ethan and Vanessa turn them away? Would they call the police, claim I was being harassed? I needn't have worried. By the time I reached the living room, Michael was already inside, his voice raised in a way I'd rarely heard. Where is she? Where's my sister? Ethan stood before him, trying to project calm authority, but looking increasingly cornered. Uncle Michael, this isn't a good time. Mom's been having episodes. Grace, Michael called out, ignoring Ethan entirely. I'm here, I said, stepping into view. Michael's face registered shock at my appearance, the weight loss, the pallor, the exhaustion evident in every line of my body. Then his expression hardened with resolve. My God, what have they done to you? Before Ethan could interject, the man with the briefcase stepped forward. Mrs. Campbell, I'm Ethan Cohen, your brother's attorney. He's retained me to represent your interests. May we speak privately? This is ridiculous, Ethan sputtered. Mom doesn't need an attorney. She needs rest and professional care. Her doctor, lawyer, Ethan cut in smoothly. Dr. Mercer filed a report yesterday expressing concern not about Mrs. Campbell's cognitive function, which he found to be entirely normal, but about potential elder abuse. That report is what facilitated our ability to intervene so quickly. The blood drained from my son's face. That's a lie. He said she was confused, paranoid. I have a copy of his report right here. The lawyer replied, patting his briefcase. Would you like to see it? He was particularly concerned about Mrs. Campbell's significant weight loss and untreated medical conditions despite her substantial pension. As they argued, I moved closer to Michael, who wrapped a protective arm around my shoulders. You look awful, Gracie, he murmured. We're getting you out of here today. My things, I began. Can be replaced, he finished firmly. You can't. Vanessa appeared from the bedroom, hastily dressed, but still managing to look polished. What's going on? Who are these people? They're trying to take Mom, Ethan said, panic edging his voice. Mrs. Campbell will be coming with us voluntarily, lawyer Ethan corrected. And we'll be reviewing her financial records immediately. I've already filed for emergency protective orders to freeze all accounts connected to Mrs. Campbell's name or pension. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. You can't do that. We have expenses commitments. Which you've been funding with stolen money, Michael interjected coldly. Not stolen, she insisted. Invested, for all of our benefit. We'll let the court decide that, the lawyer replied. In the meantime, Mrs. Campbell, please gather whatever immediate necessities you require. Mr. Roberts has booked a hotel where you can rest comfortably while we sort this out. I nodded, relieved beyond words. As Michael accompanied me to my small bedroom, I heard Ethan protesting threatening legal action of his own, but his voice sounded smaller now, less certain. Wait, Michael said, pausing in the hallway. His eyes had fallen on a notebook lying open on the dining table, Vanessa's planning notebook carelessly left out in their panic. He picked it up, flipping through the pages with increasing disbelief. Grace, they were planning to sell your house. I joined him, looking over his shoulder at the detailed timeline. Phase 1, control finances. Phase 2, eliminate resistance senior facility. Phase 3, liquidate assets house sale, $250,000. The cold, calculated nature of their exploitation was laid bare in Vanessa's neat handwriting. This wasn't opportunistic taking advantage. This was a methodical plan to strip me of everything I had. Michael's hand trembled with rage as he handed the notebook to lawyer Ethan. Make sure the police see this. As we gathered my few remaining treasures, William's photograph, my wedding ring, the small jewelry box that had somehow escaped their notice, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I was leaving the home where I had raised my son, loved my husband, built my life. But I was also escaping a prison of abuse and manipulation. When we returned to the living room, a police officer had joined the tense standoff. Lawyer Ethan was showing him Vanessa's notebook and the photos I had taken with Dorothy's camera. Mrs. Campbell, the officer said gently, would you like to press charges for elder abuse and financial exploitation? I looked at Ethan, my son, my only child, the baby I had cradled and the boy I had cherished. How had we come to this moment? Yes, I said, my voice clear despite the tears threatening to fall. Yes, I would. As Michael led me to his waiting car, I heard Ethan call out one last time. Mom, please, you don't understand. We were just trying to secure our future. I turned to face him, standing straight despite my weakened state. By destroying mine, that's not love, Ethan. That's not even human. The morning sun warmed my face as I walked away from the house that had been both home and prison. Ahead lay uncertainty, legal battles, and the long process of reclaiming my finances and independence. But also freedom, and the knowledge that I had finally stood up for myself, had refused to be erased from my own story. As Michael's car pulled away, I didn't look back. The hotel room Michael had booked for me was modest but clean, with soft lighting that didn't aggravate my constant headache. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers over the crisp white sheets, a small luxury after months of neglect. You should eat something, Michael said, setting down a tray from the hotel restaurant. The simple meal, chicken soup, fresh bread, and tea, looked like a feast to my starved eyes. Thank you, I whispered, emotion clogging my throat. For food, for rescue, for believing me when no one else had. He sat across from me, his weathered face lined with concern and barely controlled anger. How long has it been going on, Grace? The full truth. I spooned the warm soup carefully, my body so unaccustomed to proper nourishment that I feared making myself ill. It started small, a suggestion here, a borrowed item there. Then they took control of my accounts for my own good, of course. And the physical neglect. I looked down at my bony wrists, the way my wedding ring now slid loosely where it once fit snugly. About 3 months ago, the food started changing. My portions got smaller, lower quality. They always had excuses. Budget concerns, my digestion issues, my confused memory about what I'd already eaten. Michael's knuckles whitened as he gripped his chair. And your medication, the blood pressure pills. They refused to pay for them, said we couldn't afford them. I laughed bitterly. While they ordered gourmet food and bought designer clothes with my pension. A knock at the door interrupted us. Ethan Cohen, my lawyer, whose name created a cruel irony given my son's name, entered with a manila folder and a grave expression. Mrs. Campbell, I've reviewed your bank statements from the past year. He laid the papers on the table beside my soup. The extent of the financial exploitation is substantial. I set down my spoon, suddenly no longer hungry. How much? Based on our preliminary review, approximately $93,000 has been diverted from your accounts over the past 14 months. Michael swore under his breath. My head swam with the enormity of the theft. $93,000, nearly a year's worth of my pension. Where did it go? I asked, though I already suspected. Multiple destinations. The largest portion, about $65,000, went to a business account for Vanessa's vintage consignment. The shop appears to be real, though struggling. The rest went to cash withdrawals, luxury purchases, and what appear to be gambling payments. Gambling, I echoed, remembering the text messages I'd seen on Ethan's phone. Yes, there are regular payments to several online betting platforms and casinos. Michael leaned forward. What happens now? We've already secured emergency protective orders, freezing all accounts. The police have begun a criminal investigation based on the financial evidence and the documented physical neglect. But then, he hesitated, there's more concerning news. What could be worse? I asked wearily. It appears your son has been forging your signature on legal documents. We've found a power of attorney form changes to your life insurance beneficiaries and most disturbingly preliminary paperwork to sell your home. The room tilted around me. Sell my home without my knowledge. The real estate agent contacted our office after seeing the news about the protective order. She was concerned because the listing documents didn't match other paperwork she'd received from you previously. I never signed anything to sell my house. No, Ethan Cohen agreed grimly. The signatures are forgeries. Rather poor ones, in fact. They wouldn't have withstood serious scrutiny, which suggests your son was planning to move quickly before anyone could question them. Michael placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. What's our next step? We have two options, the lawyer explained. We can pursue criminal charges for elder abuse, financial exploitation, forgery, and fraud. This would likely result in jail time for both your son and his wife. My heart contracted painfully at the thought of Ethan in prison despite everything he'd done. Or, he continued, we can negotiate a settlement. They return the money, sign legal agreements never to contact you again, and we don't press charges. What would you advise? I asked softly. Legally speaking, you have an extremely strong criminal case. The evidence is overwhelming, but these cases take a toll emotionally and physically. You would have to testify, face your son in court, have your private suffering become public record. I closed my eyes, imagining sitting in a witness stand describing how my own child had systematically abused and exploited me. The thought was almost unbearable. Can I think about it? Of course, he assured me. But we should decide relatively soon. Your son and his wife haven't been arrested yet, though they've been instructed not to leave town or access any financial accounts. After he left, Michael and I sat in silence. The enormity of what had happened, what was still happening, seemed to fill the room like a physical presence. I never thought Ethan could be capable of this, I finally said. Where did I go wrong, Michael? How did my son become someone who could watch his mother starve and not care? This isn't on you, Grace. Some people just break wrong. He hesitated. There's something else you should know. I hired a private investigator when I couldn't reach you after our video call. He discovered something troubling about Vanessa. What? This isn't her first time. Her previous husband had a mother who mysteriously went broke and died in a state nursing home. The investigator found evidence suggesting Vanessa pulled a similar scheme, insinuated herself into the older woman's life, gradually took control of her finances, then discarded her when the money ran out. The revelation struck me like a physical blow. She's done this before, and Ethan knew. We don't know how much he knew initially, but the investigator found evidence that Ethan was aware of what happened to her former mother-in-law at least 6 months ago. There are text messages where they discuss learning from mistakes and how they handled your situation versus the previous one. I pressed my hands against my mouth, fighting a wave of nausea. Not only had my son participated in my exploitation, but he had known his wife had done it before, had perhaps even refined their techniques based on her previous experience. I want to see him, I said suddenly. Michael looked alarmed. Grace, I don't think that's a good idea right now. I need to look him in the eye, Michael. I need to understand how my child could do this. The lawyer advised against contact until I don't care. I interrupted with a forcefulness that surprised us both. I've spent months being told what I can and cannot do. I've been manipulated, gaslighted, and controlled. I'm done with other people making decisions for me. After a long moment, Michael nodded. I'll arrange it, but not here. Somewhere neutral with security present. 2 days later, I sat in a conference room at Ethan Cohen's law office, hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. I had insisted on coming alone, though Michael and the lawyer waited just outside. When the door opened and Ethan entered, I barely recognized my son. Gone was the confident, almost swaggering man who had dominated my home. In his place stood someone haggard, unshaven with dark circles under his eyes. Mom, he said, voice hoarse. Thank you for seeing me. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down, Ethan. He obeyed, perching awkwardly on the edge as though prepared to flee. How are you feeling? The banality of the question in the face of what he had done nearly made me laugh. I'm malnourished, anemic, and my blood pressure is dangerously high from lack of medication. How do you think I'm feeling? He flinched. I'm sorry. Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? His eyes dropped to the table. Both, I guess. At least he was honest about that. Why, Ethan? I've been asking myself that question every hour since I left. What made you hate me so much that you could watch me waste away and feel nothing? I don't hate you, he protested, looking up with genuine shock. I never hated you. Then explain it to me. Help me understand how my child could steal from me, starve me, threaten to institutionalize me, and still claim he doesn't hate me. Ethan ran a shaking hand through his unwashed hair. It wasn't supposed to go that far. At first it was just borrowing. We really did lose our jobs. We were desperate. And the gambling debts were those from your sudden unemployment too. He flinched again. You know about that? I know everything now, Ethan. The online betting, the casinos, the loans. I know about Vanessa's previous victim, her first husband's mother. I know about the plan to sell my house for $250,000. His face crumpled. It got away from me. The gambling. It started as just a way to try to make quick money when we were desperate. But then I lost and I needed to win it back, and it spiraled. Vanessa said we could fix everything if we just had capital for her business idea. So you decided to take my life savings to forge documents to sell my home. You don't understand? He insisted, a familiar whine entering his voice. We were drowning in debt. The collection agencies were calling every day. Vanessa said you had more than you'd ever spend, that we'd pay it back once the shop took off. And what about my food, Ethan? My medication? Were you planning to pay back my health too? He had no answer for that. Did you ever think about what would happen to me if you succeeded in putting me in a facility, selling my house, taking everything? What did you imagine my life would be like? We would have visited, he mumbled so pathetically that I almost laughed. How generous. Visits from the son who destroyed my life. It wasn't just about the money, Ethan blurted suddenly. It was, Dad always made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like nothing I did measured up, but you were perfect in his eyes. The dedicated nurse, the selfless mother, the loving wife. Do you know what it was like growing up in the shadow of your perfection? I stared at him, stunned. So this was revenge for being a good parent. Not revenge, just... He struggled for words. I resented how easy everything seemed for you. Your perfect career, your perfect marriage. Even in retirement, you had everything figured out. Meanwhile, I was failing at everything. My job, my finances, my marriage was strained because of money. So you punished me for your failures. I didn't see it that way at the time. It felt like balancing things. Taking some of your excess to fix our lack. I leaned forward, looking directly into the eyes so like William's. Let me be very clear, Ethan. There is nothing you can say that justifies what you did. Nothing. Your resentment, your gambling, your financial problems, none of it gives you the right to steal from me, to abuse me, to try to erase me from my own life. Tears filled his eyes. I know that now. Do you? Because even sitting here, you're still making excuses, still trying to make me understand why you had to do this terrible thing. What can I do? He asked, voice breaking. How can I make this right? You can't, I said simply. Some things can't be fixed, Ethan. You chose money and comfort over my survival. You watched me grow thin and weak and did nothing. You forged documents to steal my home. There's no making that right. Are you going to press charges? Send me to prison? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. My son in prison for elder abuse. My only child wearing an orange jumpsuit living in a cell. I haven't decided yet, I answered honestly. But I want you to understand something. If I choose not to press charges, it won't be for you. It will be for me. Because the thought of sitting in a courtroom recounting every humiliation and betrayal I suffered at your hands is more than I can bear right now. I'll pay back every penny, he promised desperately. I'll sign whatever you want. Yes, you will, I agreed. But not out of remorse, out of fear of consequences. I stood up, surprised by my own steadiness. I don't recognize you anymore, Ethan. The son I raised would never have done these things. I don't know if that's my failure or yours, but either way, we're here now. Mom, please. I can't forgive you, I interrupted, the words cutting through his plea. Not now, maybe not ever. You chose this path, and now we both have to live with it. As I moved toward the door, he called out one last time. I do love you, Mom. In my way. I paused, hand on the doorknob. Your way nearly killed me, Ethan. If that's love, I want no part of it. The legal process moved more swiftly than I had anticipated, propelled by the meticulous documentation gathered by my lawyer and the police. Bank statements showed the systematic draining of my accounts. Medical records confirmed my malnourishment and untreated hypertension. Photographs documented the empty pantry, my sparse bedroom, the stark contrast between my living conditions and the luxuries Ethan and Vanessa had purchased with my money. A week after our confrontation, Ethan Cohen presented me with our options. The district attorney is prepared to file multiple felony charges, he explained as we sat in his office. Elder financial abuse physical, elder abuse fraud forgery, identity theft. If convicted, your son could face up to 12 years in state prison. His wife, given her prior similar behavior, could receive an even longer sentence. I closed my eyes, imagining Ethan in prison until he was in his 50s. The thought brought me no satisfaction, only a profound sadness. What's the alternative? We've negotiated a settlement agreement. They return the full $93,000 plus interest in monthly payments of $1,500 until the debt is paid. That's roughly 6.5 years of payments. They sign legally binding no-contact orders. They forfeit any claim to your house or future inheritance. And they complete community service and counseling specifically focused on elder abuse prevention. And they avoid prison. Yes, it would be a deferred prosecution. If they violate any term of the agreement, miss a payment contact, you commit any other crime, the original charges are immediately reinstated. Michael, who had been silently listening, leaned forward. What do you think, Grace? It's your decision. I considered the options carefully. The settlement would provide financial restitution without the emotional toll of a trial. But would it deliver justice? Would it be enough to deter them from victimizing someone else in the future? What about Vanessa's previous victim, the other mother-in-law? Ethan Cohen sighed. Unfortunately, that case is more difficult to pursue. The victim has passed away and much of the evidence is circumstantial. However, the district attorney has agreed to open an investigation based on the pattern established in your case. And my house, the documents they forged, all nullified. We filed paperwork clarifying that any documents purportedly signed by you in the past year require verification. And we're removing Ethan from the deed, returning full ownership to you alone. I nodded slowly. I want the settlement. Not for them, for me. I want to focus on healing, not reliving the trauma in court. The following day, Ethan and Vanessa, accompanied by their own lawyer, signed the settlement agreement in the conference room where I had confronted my son. I insisted on being present, on watching them sign away their right to ever contact me again. Vanessa avoided my gaze, her once perfect appearance now disheveled, her designer clothes replaced with a simple blouse and slacks. Ethan looked broken, aging years in the space of weeks. Part of me, the mother who had loved him unconditionally for 4 decades, ached at his suffering. But a stronger part remembered the casual cruelty with which he had watched me starve and refused me medication. As they signed the final documents, Ethan looked up at me one last time. I'm sorry, Mom. Truly. I met his gaze steadily. Prove it by keeping your end of this agreement, by never doing to anyone else what you did to me. They left without another word, escorted out a different door, so we wouldn't have to share an elevator or parking lot. I watched through the window as they climbed into a taxi, Vanessa already arguing with Ethan before the door closed. It's done, Ethan Cohen said, gathering the signed documents. They'll begin payments next month. And they're legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you or contacting you in any way. What about the shop, her consignment business? Being liquidated to pay creditors. It was already failing, too much overhead, not enough revenue. Classic case of someone with no business experience thinking retail would be easy. I nodded, feeling strangely hollow. The victory, if it could be called that, brought no joy. Only relief that a painful chapter was ending. What now? I asked. Now, Michael said, putting an arm around my shoulders, you focus on getting healthy again, on rebuilding your life. But the life I had known, the home where I had raised my family, the garden William had planted, the community where I had built decades of memories, felt irreparably tainted. How could I return to a house where every room held echoes of betrayal? That night in the hotel room that had become my temporary sanctuary, I made another difficult decision. I don't want to go back to that house, I told Michael. I can't live there anymore. He nodded as though he had been expecting this. You could move to Chicago. Stay with Rachel and me until you find your own place. The offer was tempting. Chicago with its bustle and energy so different from my quiet neighborhood. A fresh start in a city where I was simply Michael's sister, not the woman whose son had abused her, a story that had, to my horror, made the local news. "I think I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. My physical recovery began in a hospital room where I spent 9 days receiving treatment for malnutrition, dehydration, and dangerously high blood pressure. The doctors were gentle but direct in their assessment of what my body had endured. "You've lost 27 pounds in less than a year," Dr. Patel told me, reviewing my chart. "That's nearly 20% of your body weight, and without your blood pressure medication, you were at high risk for stroke or heart attack." I received intravenous nutrients, carefully planned meals to reintroduce proper nutrition without overwhelming my system, and a regimen of medications to stabilize my condition. But the physical healing, while challenging, proved simpler than the emotional recovery that lay ahead. The hospital arranged for me to see a therapist specializing in elder abuse survivors. Dr. Livia Matsuda, a woman in her 50s with calm eyes and a direct manner, helped me navigate the complex emotions that ambushed me at unexpected moments. "What you're experiencing is a form of grief," she explained during one of our sessions. "You're mourning the loss of the son you thought you had, the relationship you believed existed." "I keep asking myself what I did wrong," I admitted, "where I failed as a mother." "You didn't fail, Grace. Your son made choices, terrible, harmful choices. Those were his decisions, not the result of your parenting. But something must have made him vulnerable to Vanessa's influence, to the greed that consumed him." Dr. Matsuda leaned forward. "From what you've described, Ethan harbored resentment toward your relationship with your husband. He perceived himself as inadequate in comparison. But many people experience similar feelings without resorting to abuse and theft. He had other options. He chose the destructive path." Intellectually, I understood her point. But the heart of a mother, even one who had been betrayed as thoroughly as I, had struggles to accept that her child could be capable of such calculated cruelty without some failure on her part. After my discharge from the hospital, Michael and I returned briefly to my house to pack my essential belongings. Dorothy came to help, bringing boxes and her unwavering support. "The neighborhood won't be the same without you," she said, carefully wrapping my china in packing paper. "But I understand why you can't stay." Walking through the house that had been my home for over 40 years felt surreal. The furniture was still mostly gone, replaced with Vanessa's sterile modern pieces. The walls where family photographs had hung were bare. My garden, visible through the kitchen window, was overgrown and neglected. Yet amid the desolation, I found unexpected treasures. William's books hidden in a storage box in the garage. A photo album Ethan had overlooked, containing pictures from our early years as a family. The quilt William's mother had made for our wedding, stuffed in the back of a linen closet. As I packed these precious remnants of my former life, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, but perhaps the first tentative step toward acceptance. What had happened could not be undone. My relationship with my only child was shattered beyond repair. But I was still here. Still Grace Campbell, with memories and experiences that neither Ethan nor Vanessa could erase. The house sold quickly for more than I had expected in the current market. The proceeds, combined with my pension and the monthly payments from Ethan and Vanessa, meant that I was financially secure. I would never be wealthy, but I would have enough to rebuild a life of dignity and comfort. Michael and Rachel welcomed me into their Chicago home with warmth and sensitivity. They gave me space to heal, neither pressing me to discuss what had happened, nor treating me like an invalid. Their modest 2-story house in a tree-lined neighborhood became my refuge as I gradually regained my strength and contemplated my next steps. 1 month after moving to Chicago, I discovered a support group for survivors of family financial exploitation. The stories I heard there from men and women who had suffered similar betrayals at the hands of children, grandchildren, nieces, and nephews provided a strange comfort. I was not alone in my experience, not uniquely cursed or uniquely flawed as a parent. Eleanor, an elegant woman in her 70s who had been exploited by a granddaughter she had raised, became a particular friend and guide. "The hardest part," she told me over coffee after one meeting, "is living with the knowledge that someone you loved so deeply could see you as nothing more than a resource to be drained. It makes you question every relationship, every act of kindness." "Yes," I agreed, relieved that someone truly understood. "I keep wondering if I can ever trust anyone again." "You can," she assured me. "Not everyone, not blindly. But with time and discernment, you'll find people worthy of trust. I did." Her words proved prophetic. As weeks turned into months, I gradually expanded my circle beyond Michael's family and the support group. I volunteered at a local hospital, using my nursing background to comfort patients and families. I joined a community garden, finding healing in the simple act of nurturing plants, including a small rose bush that reminded me of William's peace roses. Physically, I improved steadily. My weight stabilized at a healthy level. My blood pressure, properly medicated, returned to normal. The constant fatigue that had plagued me during my time with Ethan and Vanessa faded, replaced by a cautious energy. Emotionally, the healing was less linear. Some days brought a measure of peace and ability to focus on the present without being dragged back into memories of betrayal. Other days, a chance phrase or image would catapult me back to that dark time. The hunger, the fear, the devastating realization that my own child saw me as disposable. On one particularly difficult day, after receiving the third monthly payment from Ethan sent through the lawyer with no personal contact, I found myself overwhelmed by a wave of grief so intense it left me breathless. I miss who I thought he was. I confessed to Dr. Matsuda during our weekly video session. The little boy who brought me dandelions, the teenager who saved for months to buy me a birthstone necklace, the man I believed my son had become. I miss a person who never existed. That grief is valid, she responded. You're mourning an illusion, yes, but it was an illusion you lived with for decades. It shaped your identity as a mother, as a person. It's natural to grieve its loss. Will it ever stop hurting? The pain will change, she said thoughtfully. It may never disappear completely, but it will transform. Right now, it's a gaping wound. Eventually, it will become a scar, still visible, still part of you, but no longer bleeding. 1 year after leaving my home, I stood at a podium in the Illinois State Capitol, nervously adjusting the microphone. Before me sat the members of the House Committee on Aging, along with reporters, advocates, and other survivors who had come to support legislative changes to combat elder abuse. My name is Grace Campbell. I began, my voice steadier than I had feared it would be. I am 70 years old, a retired nurse, and a survivor of elder abuse perpetrated by my only child. For the next 10 minutes, I shared my story not in all its painful details, but enough to illustrate the insidious progression from apparent care to devastating exploitation. I described the financial theft, the physical neglect, the psychological manipulation designed to make me doubt my own mind. The current laws, I concluded, while well-intentioned, have significant gaps. By the time abuse is identified, the damage is often extensive. The proposed legislation would create earlier intervention points, enhance penalties for financial exploitation, and establish better training for healthcare providers to recognize signs of abuse. These changes won't erase what happened to me or to others like me, but they might prevent future suffering. They might save lives. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment before erupting into applause. Several committee members wiped away tears. A young woman who had identified herself as a geriatric social worker mouthed "thank you" from the front row. After the hearing, Eleanor, who had traveled from Chicago to support me, embraced me tightly. You did it, Grace. You turned your pain into purpose. I hope it makes a difference, I said, still shaking slightly from the adrenaline of public speaking. It already has, she assured me. For everyone who heard you today. And for you. She was right. Speaking publicly about my experience advocating for legislative change had given me a sense of agency I had feared permanently lost. The woman who had been silenced, gaslighted, and nearly erased was now using her voice to protect others. The proposed bill, eventually named the Grace Campbell Elder Protection Act, passed 6 months later. I was invited back to Springfield for the signing ceremony, where the governor thanked me personally for my courage in coming forward. Your story changed minds, he told me. It made the statistics real for people who might otherwise have seen this as an abstract problem. Back in Chicago, I had settled into a small but sunny apartment near Michael's home. The proceeds from selling my house had allowed me to create a comfortable new space filled with a mixture of treasured items from my past and carefully chosen new pieces that reflected my emerging sense of self. My walls displayed photographs of William, of my parents, of Michael's family, but no images of Ethan. I hadn't erased him from my history, that would be impossible, but I had chosen not to keep visual reminders of the son who had betrayed me. Monthly payments from Ethan and Vanessa arrived with clockwork regularity, transferred directly to my account through the lawyer's office. I never saw them, never communicated with them. According to the lawyer, they had separated 6 months after the settlement, their relationship apparently unable to withstand the strain of legal consequences and financial restitution. Sometimes I wondered about Ethan, where he was living, whether he had found work, if he ever reflected on what he had done. But I never acted on the impulse to ask. That chapter of my life was closed, the book set aside, though not forgotten. On a bright spring morning, exactly 2 years after leaving my home, I received a letter forwarded through Ethan Cohen's office. I recognized the handwriting immediately, though it seemed less confident than I remembered. Ethan's scrawl, once bold and rushed, now appeared hesitant, the letters carefully formed. I considered throwing it away unread. The settlement agreement prohibited direct contact, but it allowed for communication through the lawyer if I chose to receive it. For weeks, the unopened envelope sat on my desk, a tangible reminder of the past I had worked so hard to move beyond. Finally, on a day when I felt particularly strong, I opened it. The letter was brief, a single page of apology and reflection. Ethan wrote that he was in therapy addressing the gambling addiction and the deep-seated resentments that had fueled his behavior. He had found work as an administrative assistant at a small company, a significant step down from his former career, but steady employment. He expressed remorse without making excuses, acknowledged the irreparable harm he had caused without asking for forgiveness. The final paragraph read, "I don't expect a response. I don't deserve one. I simply wanted you to know that not a day passes when I don't regret what I did to you. You deserved better from your son. I live with that knowledge every day as I should." I read the letter twice, then placed it back in its envelope and returned it to my desk drawer. I felt no urge to respond, no sudden softening toward the son who had nearly destroyed me. But neither did I feel the sharp pain that had once accompanied thoughts of Ethan. Perhaps Dr. Matsuda had been right. The wound was becoming a scar still present, but no longer bleeding. That afternoon, I tended to my small balcony garden, where peace roses similar to William's now bloomed in ceramic pots. As I carefully pruned away dead leaves and added fertilizer to the soil, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. I had lost my home, my son, my sense of security. I had experienced betrayal more profound than I had believed possible. I had been humiliated, manipulated, and nearly broken. Yet here I stood, surrounded by new growth. I had rebuilt my health, found purpose in advocacy, created a home that was truly mine. I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed, and formed connections with people who valued me for exactly who I was. The woman who had once believed herself erased from her own story had become the author of a new chapter, one defined not by what had been taken from her, but by what she had reclaimed and created. As the afternoon sun warmed my face, I thought of something Eleanor had told me during those early painful days. They can take your possessions, they can take your money, they can even temporarily take your sense of self, but they cannot take your capacity for renewal. That remains yours always. Standing amid my roses, watching a butterfly alight on a perfect bloom, I knew she had been right. My story was far from over, and this time I held the pen,